Welcome back to the Philos Project channel. I'm your host, Dominique Hoffman, and this is The Overlook. Now, today, for me, this topic is very heavy. And I want to preface this by saying we've posted a tribute to Charlie Kirk here on our YouTube channel. My boss, Luke Moon, did a wonderful job with that. He knew Charlie personally. I didn't know Charlie personally, but I knew him from one degree of separation through multiple people. And what I loved most about Charlie, and this is kind of on point and on theme with today's episode, is that Charlie wasn't just a political commentator. He was a spiritual leader who commented on politics. He had a biblical solution to our secular political problems and to our culture. And that's why he was such a big threat. I don't think anyone is going to be able to fill the shoes of Charlie. And as the shock of his assassination settles, a part of me is very concerned that without such a strong figure to stand in the gap between true conservatism, between classical thought and Christian values, and what we're seeing arise on the right, which is right-wing extremism, without a titan like Charlie Kirk to stand in the gap and punish extremism or discredit extremism, I'm worried about who might fill that gap. And so I'm prayerful. And before people fill the comments with hate, I need you to hear what I'm saying. If Charlie's death proved nothing other than we are living in a time where there's spiritual warfare, we have to be able to turn inward and realize where there is deep hatred and extremism within our own party. Christians should not sit by as neo-Nazis become mainstream, like Nick Fuentes. If you are a Christian and if you admired Charlie Kirk, then you should also stand in the gap of that extremism becoming mainstream. And on posts that I've commented on, Republicans or conservatives or Christians are like, well, more young people are going to church than ever, so obviously that vacuum isn't filled with bad, or the left is what's actually bad. The right suffers from the same groupthink as the left. That is the inability to turn inwards and say, actually, this faction that blames everything on the Jews, including using this moment to blame Charlie Kirk's assassination on the Jews, is evil, and we should disenfranchise that. We should separate from that. We should ostracize and alienate extremism within our own party. Most Christians look to the left and go, oh no, the left is what's bad. The left is the cancer. But extremism on either side is bad. And we're at a point where the left was at decades ago, where we can actually squash the extremism within our party and do what Charlie would want us to do, which is to speak truth to the darkness. And we're seeing some really disturbing things come out of the wake of his assassination. I don't think that there's a need for me to even address the horrific and disturbing things I've seen come out of the left, which includes celebrating his death. I unfortunately saw a very up-close video of Charlie's assassination, and I wish I could take that out of my mind. It rocked me last week. And I have seen posters of cartoons mocking that very brutal moment. That's disgusting. And I will take a beat and just acknowledge that when there's a martyr, a true Christian martyr on the right, our response is to rally together and honor that life and to go to church. Churches were overflowing this past Sunday. And I pray, dear Lord, I prophesy this into being true, that there is a revival in America catapulted by Charlie's death. The conservative community has been good about calling out the mainstream media and their hypocrisy and how they've covered Charlie's assassination. And it's deplorable that they use this moment to now push gun control, even mocking the fact that Charlie was killed by a gun and he was very pro-Second Amendment. And we've seen mainstream news outlets condemn political violence. I'm trying to think of the last 3 casualties that have made national news. So we have Charlie's assassination, which was committed by someone with quote-unquote anti-fascist sentiments or an agenda that aligned with the transgender community. We have the Ukrainian girl in Charlotte who was stabbed to death because her killer had walked in and out of the justice system unpunished under Democrat-run cities, under a Democrat judge. And then the Catholic school shooting just a few weeks ago, where the transgender individual shot into the church and killed 2 children and injuring nearly 20 people. In every situation, it is a lefty killing or targeting conservatives or Christians or the vulnerable. And it's because of Democrat policies, whether it be pushing the transgender ideology down our young people's throats, or in the case of the Charlotte stabbing, allowing a criminal to walk free largely because of the color of his skin, because he's a black man. Okay, so there's that hypocrisy. And then we have the right. And again, just to go back to what I said at the top of the episode, I'm seeing an alarming inability for those on the right to critically look inward and or to have nuance and complex conversations and debates about different issues, including Israel. Just like the left, we blanket statement Israel. And we're going to look at videos that people have pointed to saying Charlie was waking up to Israel. They assassinated Charlie. First off, I condemn and I rebuke you, because Charlie was one of the most pro-Zionist figures on the right. He wasn't waking up to the conspiracy theory. He had critical questions for Israel. But it's because we talk about Israel like it's one monolithic thing. If you go to Israel, I've seen demonstrations in the streets of Israelis protesting their own government. You'll not find like 2 Israelis who agree on politics, on their domestic politics in Israel, until the start of this war, and now they're more unified. But prior to October 7th, Israel was on the brink of civil war. Israel is not one monolithic. The Jews are not all one evil cabal that we should talk about as the same thing. If anything, we should honor Charlie's legacy and look at different policies, look at different political figures, and talk about Israel with nuance, like anything. That is who Charlie was. And we're going to get to that as well, because at the last TPUSA summit, he had individuals like Dave Smith on to debate the issue of Israel. Not because he was changing his mind on Israel, but because he's a prominent voice that many on the right listen to, and he wanted to debate the merits of what he was saying. That is who Charlie was. He was an intellectual. He could hold things in tension. He can look at a situation and not blanket statement, make a judgment. And we've lost that ability on the right, just like we have on the left. And that's the right's critique of the left, and yet we are no better. So I'm going to walk through some examples of what I'm talking about. I knew the second the news broke that individuals were going to start saying it's the Jews. The Jews got to him. And again, I find that to be particularly disgusting, just considering the connection that Charlie has to Israel as a Christian. Him and his wife had been to Israel, are both Zionist, and they had certain critiques about what happened on October 7th. I'm talking about Charlie specifically because Erica's position is not known. She's not a public figure in the sense of she broadcasted her opinions on a podcast like Charlie. But he had legitimate questions. So do millions of Israelis in Israel. How did October 7th happen? That question has gripped the nation for the last 2 years. Him questioning how October 7th could happen does not make him a target for Israel. So there's this New York Post. They said over 10,000 posts tie Charlie Kirk's murder to Israel as conspiracy theories explode online, according to an ADL report. Now we're going to talk about the ADL. This is the Anti-Defamation League. The ADL leans left. Charlie critiqued the ADL, and I would critique the ADL of almost creating the monster on the right that is the actual neo-Nazis that didn't used to exist there. I think there's a real reckoning that the left has to do, although I don't think they have the capacity to do it, which is since 2016 or 2015, when Trump announced he was running, and because he went against the grain, and because he wasn't part of the swamp, he wasn't part of the establishment on the right or the left, they demonized him. And if you supported Trump, you were automatically a Nazi. If you didn't support Black Lives Matter, the organization, or you didn't think George Floyd was the second coming of Christ, then you were a racist. You might as well own 100 slaves. You were a despicable, deplorable human being. And when you shove DEI and you police people's language and you tell them that they're actually evil just because they were born white, you do create a monster. That is, there are a lot of young men, specifically men on the right, who are actually racist. And I reject that as a Christian. All of us should. Who are deeply anti-Semitic and are truly convicted of it. And we're going to get to the clip where Charlie talks about the ADL, and I can elaborate a little bit more there. But yeah, the ADL is a very heavily left-leaning organization. They do good work as far as they report on anti-Semitic incidents across the country, and there's not a lot of databases that keep up to date on that as consistently as ADL. So they're a useful tool. But the left created the neo-Nazi Marxists that they claimed every mainstream conservative Christian was for the last decade. So as I was saying, the second the news broke, I was like, I just have a feeling that they are going to use this to say this is just like JFK's assassination. And they claim the Jews killed JFK because he was protesting AIPAC and wanted AIPAC to register as fair, yada, 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 yada. So my favorite man in the whole world, Ian Carroll, was quick to blame Israel. Now, there's something about Ian's face and Candace's face and Tucker's face. I don't know if it's like the true evil that they like bought into. They just look so grimy. I'm not going to even play
you guys in the chat.
He has to say. I don't even want to hear what he has to say. I want to go to his comment section because I think it exemplifies the movement that these individuals are creating and how mainstream this anti-Israel rhetoric is. Shapiro taking over as a red flag. This is in reference to Ben Shapiro saying that he was going to carry the mantle of Charlie Kirk. Almost every conservative on the right has said, I'm not going to let Charlie's memory die. I'm going to carry it on. Ben Shapiro did not orchestrate the death and assassination of Charlie Kirk so he could become the new Charlie Kirk. Is anyone else side-eyed at Ben Shapiro now? In the words of Candace Owens, we don't know, but we know. Here's another comment. Look, I'll make this real simple. Charlie was pro-Israel, and Israel gave him tons of money. Israel never gave TPUSA any money. He had Jewish donors, but Charlie started waking up to actually how evil Israel is and just recently refused a payment. This is in reference to Bibi Netanyahu making a statement mourning Charlie's death, saying he was a great friend to Israel. We had just talked about him coming to Israel. Apparently, the rumor mill says that Charlie had respectfully declined that invitation to come to Israel. I wouldn't be surprised. I know that Charlie was wrestling with how to talk about Israel because the base had moved so extreme on Israel that he was trying to maintain the base while not giving in to this insanity. So there's no, like, this is like what the right is doing, just like the left does. There's like a kernel of truth. Yeah, he was invited to Israel. He recently refused a payment. And what evidence do you have of that? Huh? There's no evidence for any of this shit. Think of Israel as the mob. Once you take the money, you are owed. You cannot say anything bad about the mob, nor can you refuse anything. Otherwise, they will kill you. It's as simple as that, folks. The fact that Bibi tweeted about an American murder so fast in the wee hours of the morning Israeli time does not sit well. Someone else said, no one believes anything our government says now. Candace is more in line with Charlie's beliefs than Shapiro. She should be the heir of Turning Point USA. Dear Lord, protect us all. Let that not be true. Candace is not more in line with Charlie on Israel. In fact, she couldn't be further than Charlie on the topic of Israel. Charlie was still very much a Zionist. He could question Netanyahu's policies, but he was a Zionist. Candace Owens is a legitimate Nazi. The things that she says, I'm going to, hold on. There's this great anthology, and I'm going to do a whole episode on this. There's this huge book I have from my studies. The Jews in Poland and Russia. This is the third volume from 1914 to 2008. I have highlighted, like for the episode that I'm going to do, a ton of rhetoric on how Poles would talk about, Catholic Poles would talk about Jews and the inner warriors before World War II. And you could, what I'm going to do for this upcoming episode I'm going to do is I'm going to take excerpts from Candace Owens, and I'm going to take it from historic figures, and I'm going to ask you to guess who said what, because it's almost indistinguishable. Candace is peddling blood libels, anti-Semitic tropes. The Jews are like the evil masterminds of the world. The Jews killed Jesus, therefore they're all cursed. The Jews drink Christian blood to make matzah ball, whatever. Candace is proposing nothing new. She's presenting it as like revolutionary. There's nothing new about what she's saying. It sounds like interwar Europe and the hatred they had for the Jews. And that's an issue. Okay? But I want to look at this comment here. No one believes anything our government says now. And this goes back to the left kind of creating the monster that is now many on the conservative side of things. COVID-19 was this watershed moment. They lied about the vaccines being ethical. They arbitrarily came up with this, like, stay 6 feet away from each other. The mask actually work. Let's shut down all of the mom and pop businesses, but huge corporations like Target are going to stay open. A lot of people question our government now. There was a death of experts because the experts were wrong. And they were wrong because they profited heavily. They expanded their own powers, especially everyone in government, and contracted on our constitutional rights. Emergency powers like times of war or global pandemics are these windows of opportunities for governments to profit and individual representatives and political figures to profit. That's not unique to the US. That's not unique to 2020, 2025. That is true of all of human history. Why? Because our political representatives, our governments are run by inherently sinful people. If you are a Christian, the basic premise is that we live in a fallen world. That's why we need a savior. I don't know why we are shocked that our politicians are corrupt and evil, and they always will be. This will always be an uphill battle. There will never be a perfect politician. And on the right and the left, but specifically the right, has started to, and the new right, I should say, the far right, the woke right, talks about conflicts and war and our politicians as if, oh my gosh, they're bad, they're evil, that's crazy, so they must be Jewish. Or they must be bought off by the Zionist. No, they're just evil. They're inherently sinful. That is the basic tenet of our faith. That's why we need a savior. So these comments are just emblematic of this movement that's growing. And I think half of these are bots, half of these are actually true, which is the more disheartening part. This rumor that Ben Shapiro is taking over TPUSA smells rotten. Someone here saying, Ben Shapiro saying we will pick up his bloodstained microphone, basically telling us what his plan was and what he's doing isn't sitting well with me. What does that have to do? Like, this is so illogical. This is ideological indoctrination. This is ideological possession, just like we see on the left. It's wild to me that that's where we are in today's day and age. Okay. So let's take a look at what Candace had to say. Now, I want to be very gracious here. Candace and Charlie were friends. She got her start at TPUSA. And then after TPUSA, she went to PragerU, had a podcast, and she went to Daily Wire. So Candace's career was built off the backs of a Zionist Christian and 2 Jewish men. And yet she hates Israel now. She had a 23-minute kind of tribute to Charlie Kirk. I think it's gotten millions of views. Yeah, 5.6 million views. I don't want to undermine the fact that she's probably mourning, but the fact that she includes this bit in her tributes to Charlie, I think is so problematic. So let's take a look.
Loved his family. He really did. And I just want to say that Charlie and I, because I think this is important, never for a single minute, ever, did Charlie and I stop being friends. Even when the world demanded that from both of us, our relationship was real. We were brother and sister. You know, we were fortified. Our relationship was forged in fire, the fire of politics. I knew him. I knew Charlie, the real Charlie. And Charlie knew the real Candace, you know, and people knew I didn't like a lot of people in politics. I didn't like a lot of people calling me and doing the political dance. Of course, people guessed it correctly when they said, oh, the person who probably was the intermediary when Trump called about Brigitte was Charlie Kirk. Of course, it was Charlie. They would never send anybody else to call me with anything because they knew that Charlie was a brother to me. And there was so many things that were said that were wrong. And we laughed at how wrong it was when people thought that when I had made up my mind about Israel, that Charlie and me fell apart. Nope, never, not for a second. I said, it's the easiest decision ever because Charlie knew who I was and I knew who he was. I said, Charlie, this is where I'm at and there's no room for movement. And you tell your whoever that needs to hear it, whatever you need to tell them, because we're always going to be brothers and sisters, you know?
Okay, I find it really interesting that in a tribute to her best friend, she's bringing up the issue of Israel. And she was saying like the world demanded that we couldn't be friends. It wasn't that individuals like me didn't want Charlie and Candace to be friends. I had hoped that Charlie would use his platform to rebuke the overtly like neo-Nazi positions that Candace has started to take. And I can honestly say I had hoped Charlie would take that position a little stronger. But I don't think your average conservative Zionist wanted them to not be friends. We just wanted someone with such a platform like Charlie to speak truth or to squash radicalism. But then there's also the reality of this was an extremely complex situation for Charlie. And it's to my understanding, just being in this community that runs kind of parallel to TPUSA's mission, that Charlie was trying to figure out how to navigate talking about Israel because so many of his friends, like Candace, had become more radicalized against Israel. And because he realized a lot of the base was moving in that direction as well. And he was trying to figure out how to steward that and how to support Israel and not forsake his friendships and the base, the TPUSA base. But again, I just find it so uncomfortable that Candace would use this tribute to her friend to make a political statement about Israel. Like, how does that at all fit into what you're talking about? And great, if she wanted to leave it as, we might be disagreeing on this really key issue right now and leave it at that, but we're still brother and sister. Okay, but she keeps going.
You know, we're always going to be brother and sister. And we would talk about things and debate things behind the scenes. And I think my perspective was as it's been throughout our relationship. You might not get it now, Charlie, but you will. I'm only a few years older than you, but I think you're gonna see things my way. And
there's the narcissism. There's the true, in my opinion, malignant narcissism of Candace. Of you're gonna see things my way, and it's, you know, how it's been throughout our entire relationship. I'm a few years older. You'll see it my way. Candace did not make Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk made Candace. Candace's entire career was built off of a Christian Zionist and then two Jewish men, Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro. Candace is not, and I'm not saying this because I just vehemently disagree with her, she's not a particularly bright individual. If you go back and trace her entire career, she parrots whoever she's aligned with. And at the time she was at TPUSA, it was Charlie Kirk. He built Candace. Truly, he built Candace. And it benefited both of them because she was a Black woman speaking to the race wars in 2020 and speaking out against Black Lives Matter as a Black conservative Christian woman. But Candace herself didn't craft those talking points. She didn't have the vision to see what Charlie saw. So the fact that she's saying like, it's the same as it was throughout our entire relationship, you'll see what I see. I'm just a few years older. You might be older, but you're not wiser and you're definitely not smarter.
I think in the end, Charlie was going through a spiritual transformation. I don't think it, I know it. He was going through a lot and there was a lot of pressure. And it's hard for me to watch the people who were pressuring him.
The people who were pressuring him, she's talking about the Jews and the pro-Zionists in America.
I don't know, just say the things that they're saying. You know,
I have not seen a singular pro-Israel individual come out and say anything bad about Charlie Kirk. Instead, they've said, oh, he was a friend to Israel. And that's probably something Candace doesn't want to hear. But this is what deeply bothers me, is she's making this about the issue of Israel. I think at this point, her brother, her best friend, had been gone for a singular day. She posted this on September 11th, the next day. And she's bringing up the issue of Israel. And then she's claiming that he was going through a spiritual awakening against the Jews and against Israel, and that he was changing his position to follow her opinion because she's so wise, right? He'll see things the way I see things. I think this is particularly narcissistic, cold, and calculated on her end. Truly, she did not let a close friend's death go to waste. And also because I don't think she's correct at all. I don't know Charlie personally. But up until very, very recently, before his assassination, he still held very strong positions on Israel. And the fact that Candace would then speak for a dead friend in this way, I think is despicable. Personally, I think is despicable.
There's something about it that just feels really fake. Feels really fake to me.
Says the fakest person on the right. Okay. So the reason this is also important is because Candace took to Twitter like she likes to do. And she had a few things to say because she has jumped on the Israel killed Charlie bandwagon, which is, I think, why she went on and said he was having a spiritual awakening and he was changing his position on things. First off, she's coloring and she's painting awakening to Israel as some sort of like a true alignment with true Christianity, and he was having a spiritual awakening. We serve a Jewish Messiah. We believe in the Old Testament, the prophets of the Old Testament, which prophesied our Jewish Messiah. And so while you don't have to even agree theologically on what a lot of Christian Zionists might believe about the relationship between Jews and Christians, I do not believe that Candace's insinuation that some sort of a true spiritual revival means rejecting the Jewish people. It's ridiculous. But so this is her tweet. Okay, so in this tweet, Candace retweets what someone said. They said, Charlie was about to lose his last major donor because he refused to ban Tucker Carlson from events. There are a lot of people shedding crocodile tears. The billionaires must be exposed for the cretins they are. Okay, so then Candace said, Bibi Netanyahu also spoke about how he called Charlie 2 weeks ago to invite him to Israel. This was in his tribute to Charlie's death. That phone call is lacking context. He should provide the proper context of what and who inspired him to make that call and exactly how Charlie replied to the invite. So there's this insinuation that because Charlie was going to lose major donors for not ostracizing Tucker Carlson, and then because he declined an invite to Israel, an official state visit with Bibi Netanyahu, that he was taken out by like the Mossad. Candace has another tweet here as well. Talking about the shooter specifically. She retweeted the photo of him and she says, we know they're lying. If they'd prefer to try and be another BS narrative before my show on Monday, we'll be happy to shred that one too. So essentially saying that this is a cover-up, parallels to JFK's assassination, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so Candace is not the only one making these claims. There are a ton of people saying that Charlie Kirk was warned to not platform people like Tucker and Dave Smith. So there's this is like a no-name podcast, but I think it kind of speaks to the same issues. I'll play this clip.
What I also believe from this particular event is what ultimately put Charlie Kirk into extremely hot water. And that, of course, is the fact that he decided, whether he was warned ahead of time, which I think you and I would both agree he probably was, do not platform Dave Smith under any circumstances. And he did it anyway.
There. First of all, look, if you support what Israel's doing in Gaza right now, I would just, like, my advice to you guys is just know that you never have a leg to stand on claiming to be pro-life for the rest of your life. Just saying that. Oh, so it's okay to support
Let's not boo our speaker.
It's okay to support a policy that is killing babies. All of a sudden, killing babies is negotiable. All right, fine. I'm just reading the room.
So, Dave, why don't you?
No, I'm not talking about for Hamas.
Hold on, back up, Dave.
I just let you go on this whole long thing.
I'm going to actually help you out here, Dave, okay? What I'm doing, I want you to tell the audience what's going on in Gaza, because some people in the audience don't know what's going on. So don't assume they know, and let's not get back.
Oh, okay. Well, I did assume that most people know that lots of babies are being killed in Gaza, but maybe I shouldn't have assumed that.
Don't be sarcastic about it, Dave. Instead, I mean this.
No, I meant that literally. I did assume that.
Loop where they're on social media all the time, okay? So walk through numbers, walk through what animates you to say something like that.
Well, okay. Well, let me respond to a few of the things that Judge claimed. I mean, if you want to go, there was just a major report a couple weeks ago in Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, where they had a bunch of IDF soldiers. They actually had one who went on record who was saying that they were ordered to shoot at crowds of people who were going into.
All right.
Okay.
So you got Josh Hammer on one.
So this was taken from this summer's TPUSA summit, where I already mentioned Charlie invited Tucker Carlson to speak, Dave Smith, and Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly is much more middle of the road. I think she was calling for the Epstein files to be released, but that was the only like controversial thing that she was wanting. And then there was this debate between Dave Smith and Josh Hammer about Israel and Gaza and etc. And Charlie did get quite a bit of pushback. And this is all I'll say. Again, to claim that this is why Israel would assassinate him is just so crazy to me. This exemplifies what Charlie Kirk was all about. He was about real debate and substantive debate. And he platformed Dave Smith to come and debate those ideas because, again, they've become very mainstream within the conservative right. The irony even of this clip that they're showing here is that Charlie's basically telling Dave, calm down, don't be sarcastic. And then, Dave Smith cites Haaretz, which is like the most left-leaning publication ever in Israel, which is like having a debate about George Floyd and saying, George Floyd's character was one of a strong Christian man. You're like, oh, what's your evidence for that? It's like, oh, an expose in CNN. It's like, okay, well, that's very politically slanted. So anyways, just to critique Dave Smith here for a second. But there was a lot of pushback. I can acknowledge that in this community to Charlie Kirk platforming people like Dave Smith. But again, that speaks to the essence of who Charlie was. He was a debater. He wanted to platform controversial ideas in the arena of public debate and let the best idea win. So now I'm going to turn to what the internet trolls have started to post. And to me, this is like the really disturbing stuff. I'm going to fact check a lot of this because it's false. But here's just one example of the many videos I've seen coming through.
Push donors. They have a lot of explaining to do, a lot of decoupling to do.
Really quick. The channel is called They Are Watching Us. So again, this like conspiratorial Big Brother is watching. There's some sort of like evil eye or like Illuminati eye here and like a matrix. So this idea that we're just like in a matrix. And the caption says, Charlie Kirk was silenced by the elite, by the Jews, by Israel, by becoming a threat to their agenda. And this is a clip of him talking about the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League.
Because Jewish donors have been the number one funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews. And now it's coming for Jews, and they're like, what on earth happened?
Okay. So just to elaborate on what Charlie is saying, which I completely agree about, he's saying, first off, secular Jews here in America, so westernized secular Jews, many of whom are not religious at all, they are just ethnically Jewish, are left-leaning. And just like many Black individuals continue to vote for policies that actually undermine their minority population's self-interest because they're ideologically possessed, Charlie's saying the same thing happens with left-leaning Jews in the United States, which is true. He's also talking about the Anti-Defamation League. They funded and they have been proponents of many of the ideas that have now turned on them since October 7th. So that's what Charlie's talking about here. And this channel is somehow saying that this was like reason for his assassination. He's critiquing a very small, specific subsection of Jews, which is United States secular Jews who fund, like George Soros, all of these open border policies, all the social justice movements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a lot of left-leaning Jews in America who either voted right this last election because they saw what was happening with October 7th, who see their friends turning on them because the neo-Marxist left is the pro-Hamas party. Okay, let's look at some other clips that claim to prove that Charlie was taken out for his stance on Israel. Let's see, what's this one?
Here the day before he died. He says, is the media truly being honest about what's going on with Israel? He said, they've lied about all this other stuff. Can we be sure that the media is even honest? And guess what Ben Shapiro does? His eyebrows go. He like snarled almost like in disgust. A lot of people are joking.
We're going to watch the original clip. Like the way that the right is reading into all of this. Ben Shapiro should not be running TPUSA. He's not going to run TPUSA. He just said, I'm going to carry the mantle of my friend, meaning his life's mission to advance conservative values in America. Like, where are these people getting this shit from?
And that's the moment that it was decided that Charlie was no more. Yes.
When Ben Shapiro scowled and lifted his brows, that's when they decided he was no more. It's like, what the actual explicit... I'm trying to keep this video free of curse words, but what is this man talking about? It's stupidity. We have to be careful because all these people have microphones and podcasts. This guy got 18,000 likes. He's a freaking idiot. I'm not going to even... Should we
he said that
listening?
to Ben Shapiro. No, I don't like Ben Shapiro. So, and then after his death, if I'm not mistaken, this was like the first public address that Ben Shapiro gives. He says, don't worry, Charlie. I'm going to step in and I'll take over Turning Point USA for you. I'm going to go to these colleges. I'm going to speak to them. We don't want you there, Ben. Why would he say this? For one, because now he can really bring some Jewish ideology in there. He's a Jew. He loves Israel more than anybody.
Did this mofo not listen to Charlie Kirk talk about Israel, which I have some clips I'll show you from his on-campus debates? Charlie Kirk was vehemently anti-neo-Marxist social justice and the intersection between that and the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian movement. But what's happening on the right is the same thing. It's just clothed slightly differently. Marxism and fascism, have you seen the horseshoe theory? They meet at the bottom. They're not actually two different things. They're just two sides of the same coin. And this bro is on the other side of it and an idiot.
Notice how he didn't like Trump at all. He was a never Trumper up until Trump was bought out by the Jews and by Israel. Big surprise. And
when exactly was Trump bought out by the Jews and Israel? Ben Shapiro was always pro-Trump. The only thing Ben Shapiro didn't agree with on the right was that the 2020 elections were stolen. But Ben Shapiro has never been anti-Trump. He and Charlie were some of the voices back in 2016 who were pro-Trump.
plus,
Trump's second term has not been very pro-Israel. If you look at the policies of this administration, it's very sympathetic to the Gulf states and Qatar, which is not pro-Israel. So these idiots don't even know what they're talking about. It's wild to me. So let's look at a few more examples, as much as I can stomach. Here's another one of him on the Patrick Bet David podcast. Another Hidden and Truth is the name of the account. It looks like it has the Star of David with the Illuminati on the back of the $1 bill. So again, some sort of Jewish conspiracy matrix thing.
Guys not know this was taking place.
So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier, right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel is on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff.
Okay, so there's actually, I have the full clip of this original interview. They're talking about, this was filmed, I believe, in May, that interview, very soon after October 7th. And then this caption says, but lately something has shifted again. Kirk has gathered groups of young Turning Point Christians and encouraged them to ask questions about Israel's role in the devastation in Gaza. It looks like he's testing the waters and creating space for doubt in a conversation that's been tightly policed. So this is the claim. This is the narrative, right? And you can watch the whole interview where Charlie's talking about this. There's another kind of clip that's been going around where Charlie is talking about October 7th being a Holocaust. And the way this clip has been edited together, it looks like he's talking about Gaza.
Is the closest thing to the Holocaust any of us have lived through. But the fact is now Bibi and the Israeli hard-right government has a mandate, I gotta be careful the way I say this, they're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truth.
When he says they have a mandate to seek justice and revenge, he's talking about Israel and talking about just war. And when he says this is the closest thing to the Holocaust, he's talking about what happened on October 7th. He's not talking about the Palestinians have a mandate to inflict justice or that what's happening in Gaza is a Holocaust. This clip has been spliced very deceptively to try and create that narrative. And then you see people here, and this is why they eliminated him. Rest in peace, brother. 2 effing days later, Charlie was killed. This was from 2 years ago, this interview. This is not new. So there's this very carefully crafted, spliced together, manipulative narrative that someone like Candace took the time at the end of her tribute to Charlie to plant the seeds for. And that's why I think Candace's video, going back to that, is particularly despicable. Okay, there's one more clip I want to show because I just think this is when it kind of starts getting gross and the right is now looking a lot more like the left, at least the radical right looks a lot like the radical left. Here's a video of Charlie essentially saying, I'm okay with questioning policies that Israel puts forth, but that he is against anyone who is anti-Israel. You even just see this like GIF right here, bye forever. It's like disgusting. And then this creator says, I wonder who paid Charlie. So this creator is insinuating that Charlie is bought off by Israel.
Not an apologist for Israel, but I reject wholeheartedly this narrative. Christians who turn their back on Israel, it says in Genesis and Romans, 1 Thessalonians, Paul said, if you bless Israel, you will be blessed. If you scorn.
Charlie Goy is wrong on that statement. First off, that reference of Israel is actually to Jacob, who is the grandson of Abraham.
In Israel, you will be scorned. The Israeli government, plenty of suspicious things going on. How do we know the Bible is true? Every day, there are archaeological discoveries that confirm the truths of the Bible in 1 Samuel, in 1 Kings, in 1 Chronicles. There is a diabolical satanic agenda every single day to try and delegitimize the scriptures. And I will defend the Holy Land, the place that let me see where my Lord and Savior lived. And I will not apologize for that.
So Charlie Goy knows who killed Jesus, right?
Yeah, it was the Romans, you dumb idiot. So anyway, so then there's also like this propaganda, like Charlie has been bought off, blah, 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 blah. But this despicable man and all the people in the videos that I've showed you or spliced together these videos are carefully trying to manipulate reality and truth when there is a very real reality and truth in front of us, which is that we as Christians are at war with the secular left and with the Islamic conservative right, which is influencing a lot of this anti-Jewish rhetoric. And Charlie has said as much, and I'll link the clip down below because I did not find it for this video, but he says the West will be threatened by the alliance between the neo-Marxist left and Islamism. And that's exactly what is happening. All this anti-Jew stuff is just funded and pushed by Islamists. Because instead of looking at the very real and true enemy in front of us, one that we don't need to manipulate history for, we don't have to come up with conspiracy theories for, instead of looking at what stands in front of us as our biggest enemy, there is a concerted effort to find the hidden evil Jew in every global crisis and every assassination and every corner and facet of political and everyday life. It's all manipulated. It's all fake. It's propagated. It's not true. I'm not going to play the full Patrick Bet-David interview, but you can watch that on the PBD podcast. Here, I will link it in the description box down below. But I'm going to just play this clip. This is what Charlie actually said versus what you were seeing spliced together.
Because here's the essence of it. The essence is this. This is the closest thing to the Holocaust that any of us have lived through. But the fact is now Bibi and the Israeli hard right government has a mandate. I got to be careful the way I say this. they're going to try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I mean, that's, and I don't use that term lightly. Okay. They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there. Okay. And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged to the streets. But there are some serious questions here, Patrick. And let me tell you, my pattern recognition.
So he's saying he's recognizing that perhaps the Israeli government used October 7th and Bibi used it to contract his powers, to have war power, and to unite Israel because it was on the brink of civil war. That's what this entire conversation that he's talking about on the PBD podcast is. But what he acknowledges is October 7th was the closest thing to the Holocaust, and there is such thing as just war, and they have a mandate to seek justice for what happened against their civilians, and that they should not be forced into a truce with their enemy after what happened on October 7th. Charlie is upholding all of that. So again, be careful what you fall for on a small little clip it on YouTube, because this is the full clip. I'm going to link the full conversation down below. But again, what the right has lost, which the left lost a long time ago, is the ability to question specific policies or political leaders, like Charlie questioning Bibi, without monolithically saying, oh my gosh, he's questioning all of Israel and Israel's right to exist and Israel's right to self-determination, and if Israel is even the land of the Bible. Like, we're so extreme on the right now. What happened to intellectual and thoughtful conversations, critiques, and debates? And that's what Charlie represented. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a few clips of Charlie doing the opposite of what a lot of people on the far right would like to have you believe, which is defending Israel and rebuking what happened on October 7th.
Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy? I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil, but I think also that there is no justification. Are they equally? There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children. Well, let's futile. Let's zero in on. There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing innocent populations, and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West.
You've made that point, but
it's not a point; it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish. I let you talk. Israel, at its holiest day of the calendar year, besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War, on Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded. There is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Isn't that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on. It's interesting you say that, because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy and Hamas is bad has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
I guess that's a great clip of Charlie. And I think that clip perfectly encapsulates that he was a staunch defender of just war, of Israel's right to self-determine, and understood who the good guy and who the bad guy is in the fight between Israel and Hamas, recognizing the evil of Hamas. And that should just be the most mainstream position of any conservative Christian. And yet Candace and Dave Smith, I don't believe Dave Smith is a Christian. I believe he's Jewish and a non-practicing Jew. They are the ones pushing this anti-Israel, Hamas is actually not that bad, or we're just going to completely ignore Hamas narrative, which aligns with the neo-Marxist left more than a true conservative like Charlie. Here are a few more examples of Charlie challenging this mainstream anti-Israel narrative, which has become mainstream on the left and the right.
Who ran Gaza up until 2005?
Same thing.
No, Israel did. Israel used to occupy the Gaza Strip. 10,000 Jews left Gaza. The IDF totally withdrew. Why did Israel do that?
You tell me. You're the one at the table.
To pursue peace, because they were promised a peace deal if they got out of Gaza.
Okay. And here's another one as well. And I'm just showing these to highlight with Charlie's own words where he stood. I reject Candace's insinuation that he was having a spiritual revival, blah, blah, blah. I think to speak on behalf of a deceased friend who was brutally assassinated, and then within one day using that to push your own anti-Israel agenda is particularly disgusting. Here's another example of Charlie basically challenging where's Palestine? Does Palestine exist?
Palestine.
You don't believe that Palestine have the right to exist?
No, everyone has a right to exist. Show me where it is. It's a non-existent place.
Okay, yeah, I don't think we're gonna.
That's why
agree
we're on
that.
different planets, right? But what is the national identity of Palestine? Educate me.
Palestinians.
What is that?
Like, what do you mean? What is that?
Yeah, what ethnicity are they?
Arabs?
Okay, so all Arabs are Palestinians?
No, but they are Arabs. What you trying to say? What is your point?
I'm trying to say, because at what point does somebody become a Palestinian?
When he was born in Palestine, or if his parents are Palestinians?
Again, this is why we're talking past each other.
What you trying to say?
I don't think the place exists.
What?
Because it doesn't. It's called Judea and Samaria. It's not called Palestine.
And the fact, and that was a relatively recent debate. And he's debated quite a few of these conspiracy theorists on this campus. I'll probably do a video reacting to that as well. But even Charlie using the term Palestine doesn't exist, meaning the West Bank, it's Judea, Samaria, lets everyone know where he stood on the issue of Israel. If you are not a Zionist, you are not designating the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. I want to end with a clip from Dave Smith, because I think even Dave Smith realized how radical the Ian Carroll's and the Candace Owens' stance was when it came to Charlie. And he acknowledges that Charlie is a Zionist. This is his reflection on the assassination of Charlie.
And the light. And there's all I'm saying is just try to stay away from that bad force. And I should say, one more thing that I just, because I, of whatever, I don't even want to get into the politics of any of it, but I did see, Ian Carroll, and I'm not trying to personally blast him or anything like that. I'm not starting any feuds or nothing like that. I've said nice things about Ian in the past. I know he's said nice things about me, but I see him out there and I've seen a bunch of other people doing this, but it's just if you want to go look through it, I mean, it's just crazy. But he had this post about how Israel did this. Israel just murdered Charlie Kirk. And you know me, I don't know. I'm biggest fan of Israel, but I literally just replied and I went, what evidence do we have that Israel was involved with this at all? And I mean, man, if you want to be disturbed, go look through the replies to that. It is unbelievable how people put together theory. They're like, what evidence do you have? By the way, the answer is none. We have absolutely no evidence. There is absolutely no reason to even suspect that is the case, let alone to determine that it's a fact. And all the things people are posing, it's just guys, Jesus Christ, man, I'm sorry. I just don't go for sloppy, kooky theories. If you got some evidence, bring it to me and I'll be the first one to look into it. But then people going he was waking up to Israel. Dude, he said release the Epstein files, and he once on an interview said the pro-Israel people are getting a little too crazy when they're accusing even me of being anti-Israel, but that's about it. And to his credit, he defended having me at the thing and having Tucker and Megan there and stuff, but
he's talking about the TPUSA summit this summer, which we already talked about. He got backlash for. And again, people like me push back on him having them, not because there shouldn't be free speech, et cetera, but because, first off, Dave Smith is not like a conservative Republican. But second off, because someone like Tucker specifically, I mean, I just think Dave Smith is completely off on his take. But someone like Tucker Carlson is very ideologically motivated, and having him at the TPUSA summit, in my opinion, legitimized this growing new right as a legitimate position on history and on geopolitics. I personally don't agree. Just like I wouldn't agree if someone had like a pro-Stalin speaker at a left-leaning conference. I don't think we should have like pro-Nazi speakers at conservative conferences. But again, to Charlie's character, he was interested in the merit of debating. And also he had personal relationships with these people that he was navigating despite the radicalization of the right. And I think to Dave Smith's credit, he's recognizing that, okay, this Jewish conspiracy thing is like, it's gone a little too far. There's zero evidence that Israel was involved with this. And let me just throw another idea out there, but I don't want to get into these conspiracy theories about who his assassin is, mostly because I think it makes his death something to debate or to conspire about. And at a time when a widow is grieving, or a widower is grieving, a widow? She's a widow. At a time when Erica Kirk is grieving her husband's death, I don't think it's the time to say it's the Jews, it's this, it's that. But I will throw out an idea, and I'm not saying that this is true or not true, but our enemy on the conservative right is not the Jew. It is this growing Islamist force that is influencing the right. And the fact that the right immediately jumps to the Jews, I question who those people are getting funded by, because they're pushing such radical disinformation, just like Dave Smith said. There is zero evidence for it. And the right has always been the party or the side of truth, like capital T. And we've descended into like rabid conspiracy theories. And there's traction. Candace's video had 5.6 million views. I don't think everyone was there to listen to her conspiracies about Israel, but they heard it if they watched the whole video. Ian Carroll's video had over 300,000 views. This isn't on the fringes. Nick Fuentes used to be fringe. He's not fringe anymore. He's moving mainstream. And his audience are the Gen Z and Gen Alpha young men who feel disenfranchised because, again, the left created the monster that they claimed we all were, which were neo-Nazis. And we have to pray in the wake of Charlie's assassination that conspiracy, Jew-hating faction of the right does not move mainstream or grow larger. And I wanted to make this video just to kind of review the lay of the land and review the different arguments. This idea that just because Charlie Kirk had Dave Smith or Tucker at the TPUSA summit, or just because he was friends with Candace, does not mean that he was changing his mind on Israel. He was not. But also, we're allowed to question Israel. We're allowed to say, hey, there's actually a very complex and lively debate within Israel about domestic politics. In America, I don't know if it's because we're so geographically isolated or because our education system just honestly sucks, or if for simple people, and again, the social justice left appeals to simple people who want to groupthink in the very same way that the new right appeals to simple people who want to groupthink. Like when we talk about Israel, it shouldn't be monolithic. We can have nuanced debates. That's what Charlie loved, nuanced debates. You can critique a policy of Israel and not then immediately believe that the Jews rule the world, are pedophiles, and actually orchestrated World War II and the Holocaust was a lie just so they could, create the state of Israel in 1948. Like there is such a huge gap between asking genuine questions and then just asking questions about Israel and leaping to they rule the world and Jews are actually Nazis and Hitler was the good guy. There is such a large gap between that. And that's where Charlie stood, was in that gap, to have honest debates. And so in conclusion, let's let that be his legacy, not the crazy radical stuff we're seeing online. And I'm sure a lot of this are Russian and Chinese and Iranian and Qatari bots that are pushing forth this content. But look at the real interviews. Look at it in context, like the one I showed you where it sounded like he was saying Gaza is the closest thing to the Holocaust when he was talking about October 7th. Look at things in their context. And the other thing I love about Charlie is when he debated, he was a precise debater. Definitions mattered, historical context mattered, ideology mattered, how a specific policy position fit into a larger political movement mattered to Charlie. So when we talk about Israel, when we talk about geopolitics, when we talk about the Jews, let's look at issues in a holistic and genuine way and not come to extreme conclusions or completely other Jews and talk about Jews as if they're one monolithic group of people when they're not. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for bearing with me as I was sick as well. So I hope this was somewhat coherent. Again, I'm praying for Erica Kirk and his family, his two beautiful children, and for America. And I am so encouraged to see that the response was to go to church. But in carrying the mantle, like Ben Shapiro said he was going to do for Charlie, but every conservative American should help do for Charlie, is speaking truth and debating these dangerous ideas. And while I don't want to politicize his death, I want to speak out against those who are trying to use this to further their very corrupt agendas. And again, I want to encourage conservative Christians who just have a knee-jerk reaction to hate the left. Yes, the left is ideologically possessed. They hate God. And in many ways, I don't think there's much helping them. The only person who's going to change a neo-Marxist college student's heart who's transgender and a person of color, and, you know, they build their identity off of their intersectional identity and how they're disenfranchised in society, and their identity is one of victimhood. Only the Lord's going to heal that. I'm less concerned spiritually. I'm equally concerned with the hearts and minds of these people, but politically, I'm less concerned about their response to Charlie. I expect that. They are depraved, they are godless, they are demonically possessed. The side that I am most worried about is the right. Because if the right fractures and the spiritual warfare and this Islamic influenced guys as Jew conspiracy somehow splits the party, and now there's on a titan like Charlie standing in the gap, I'm worried about the right. And I'm worried about the right also because the right largely claim to be Christian. And if you believe that your Jewish God, your Jewish savior, and the God of the Jewish people wants you to hate the Jewish people and the state of Israel, I think you don't understand the Bible and its beautiful and complete story. With that, I'm going to leave you. Like, comment, and subscribe to the Fearless Project channel, and I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one.